Hi everyone, and welcome again to SmartPrep. Today we are continuing with our NBT mathematics preparation. So we are doing algebra, and let's get to it. So the first question says, solve the inequality 1x open brackets x squared minus 4 open close brackets open brackets negative 2 minus open brackets x minus 3 squared close brackets all over 3x, and that is all less than 0. Okay, so let's have a look and see what we have here. So well, let's just look at each of these factors independently. So what do we know about 3x? Well, 3 to the x is exponential. So we know if it was 3 to the x, it would be like that. So that's always greater than 0. Right? There's our exponential graph there. So this is always positive. Okay. If we look at this bracket here, x minus 3 squared, this is also always positive, right? Because a negative times a negative, if it was negative, if say x was 0, it would be negative 3 times negative 3, which would be 9. So because this is a square, even if it was a negative inside the brackets, when you multiply a negative by a negative, you get a positive. So that's always positive. But now we have this is negative 2 minus a positive. So this negative 2 minus a positive, this now always is going to be negative. Okay, so this whole thing here is going to be, whole thing here is going to be negative. Okay, that's always positive. This has to be negative. Okay, so now we have a negative over a positive. And what do we need this to be? We need this to be less than 0. So we need it to be a negative. Well, we know a negative over a positive is a negative, which means that if we would have made, if this part here was negative, we'd have negative times negative, which would be positive over positive, which would give us a positive. So this part here in red needs to be positive. This must be greater than 0. Okay, so let's just solve for that part there. All right, so we have 1x, which is just x. X squared minus 4 factorizes as x plus 2x minus 2, right? It's a difference of squares. Okay, and that all has to be greater than and equal to 0. Okay. All right, well, what are our critical values? So our critical values are x equals 0, right? For this part here, x plus 2 equals 0, so x is equal to minus 2. And then x minus 2 equals 0, so x equals 2. Okay, so if our table of values, we have a negative 2, we have a 0, and we have a 2. Okay, now for this, what you have to do is you have to test to see, when we know that when we put in one of these values, we get a 0. Okay, so we know if we put in one of these values, we get a 0. But at those values is where it changes from positive to negative. So usually from positive, sometimes it stays positive, but well, let's just test and see. All right, so we take a value that's less than negative 4 to test over here at the beginning. So, well, let's just try minus 4, right? So minus 4 plus 2, that would give us a negative there. And it would give us a negative there. And we'd have a negative there. So over here, it would be negative, right? Put a, that would be sort of negative 4. This would be negative 4 plus 2, which would be negative 2. And this would be negative 4. A negative times a negative, that gives us 3 negatives. It's an odd number of negatives, and we have a negative. So that's how I got there. Okay. All right, then I can try a value between -2 and 0 to see what happens. Okay, so -1 is probably the easiest. Okay, so we'll just replace this with a -1. Okay, and a -1 plus 1, well, that's going to give us a -1 plus 2 gives us a +1. And -1 minus 4, that gives minus 2 gives us -3. Okay, so negative times negative. It's an even number of negatives, so it's a positive, right? Because negative times negative gives us a positive. Positive times positive is a positive, so that's a positive. We can see a change from negative to positive. Okay, and then from 0 to 2, we can try 1, right? So if we replace it with a 1, we just get a 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 is 3, and 1 minus 1, 1 minus 2 is -1. Okay. Flipping over my words a bit, yeah. So positive and negative, 2 positives and an odd number. So a little trick here, if you get an odd number of negatives, it's negative. So if it's 1 negative, it'll be negative. If it's, say, 4 negatives, it'll be positive. Okay, so then the final one will be 3. Well, we can, yeah, let's just do 3 because that's above 2. So if we put a 3 in here, okay, just erase all that so we can add it up. Okay, obviously in the exam, we would be making sure we have enough time, so I probably wouldn't do all that, but just for you guys. So 3 plus 2 is 5. 3 minus 1 is 3 minus 2 is 1. Okay, and so it's positive, 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 which gives us a positive. Okay. And so what are we looking for? We're looking for where it's positive, right? So between -2 and 0. And between, so it includes, right? It includes the -2 and 0. And 0. And then positive from 2 to all the way to infinity. So from there all the way to infinity would be 2 to infinity. Okay, now normally if it goes to infinity, we do a round bracket because you cannot reach it. But I don't see an option with a round bracket. So we can see that it's going to look the most like this one here. Okay, so we've got that and then that. So it's going to be D. Okay. But if you guys are doing a trick, just remember if you don't use the square bracket when you are going to infinity. All right. Let's look at the next one. So guys, if you're looking this and you're a bit worried about these questions, remember that these are exactly as what will come up in your NBT exam. So if you are struggling, check out the link in the description to all the past papers, and the ones that you are struggling with, you can just memorize the answers. Obviously, it's better to try and understand. And the other thing is just look at our playlist as well, where we have a lot of questions as well. So I'll put all that in the description. And let's continue. Okay, so this little symbol here means the sum of. Okay, so that means the sum of. Okay, and it's a rule. So this is the rule. 2n minus 1 is the rule. Okay, so if I was to put n as 1, I would get a minus 2n minus 1, which would be 1. If I put in a 2 for n, so this is when n is 1, so that's the first term. Let's do it over here. Okay, so the first term is 1. If I replace n with a 2, I get 2 times 2, which is 4 minus 1 is 3. Okay, and what we know is 2 times n gives us an indication that our we're adding 2 each time, right? So 2 times 3 would be 6. And so what we notice is we get a 2, 1, 3, 5, 7. And we have an arithmetic sequence. Okay, and we want the sum of the arithmetic sequence. So this sum of, if I have a value where it says n equals 1, this means that the sequence starts at 1. Okay, so that means it starts at 1. Okay, so that's why I put in the 1 over there. Okay, and then I put in the 2 because the next value would be 2. Okay, and it goes all the way up to p. Okay, so it ends at p. So it ends at p. So p is the last term. So p is the last term, and n is the first term. 1 is the first term. Okay, well, they want the sum of this arithmetic sequence up to p. So up until p. So what we need to do is we need to use our formula for the sum of an arithmetic sequence, which is n over 2. And then it'll be 2n plus n minus 1 d, right? This shouldn't be bracket. Okay, so what I can do is I can just sub in my values. Okay, so n is the last term because n is the number of terms. So this is a bit confusing because they put n as the first term. But remember, these are just letters to indicate stuff. So if they call this an n, it doesn't suddenly mean that I can put that as our n here, because a is our first term. This must be 2a. It must be 2a. Plus 2a n minus 1d. Okay, so then we put in, instead of n is our number of terms, which in this case would be p. Okay, so that would be p over 2. Our a is our first term, which we see was 1. Okay, so it'll be 2 times 1 plus, and then our n is, we said, p. Oops. And then our d is our difference. Well, the difference is 2, isn't it? So it's 2. The difference is 2. Put that in. Okay, so remember our difference here, it's 3 minus 1, it's 2. 5 minus 3 is 2. So we see common difference. And when you see this, guys, when you're doing your matric exams, if you see a 2 in front of whatever this value is, if they give you sigma notation question, that is the difference. Okay, that is the difference. Okay, so that's going to be 2. Okay, now we times this out. So when we times this in this part in here, those cancel and we get p. When we times p into here, well, this is p minus 1 times 2. Okay, so that's 2p minus 2. So plus 2p minus 2. But when you times that by p, you'll get p squared. So it'll be 2p squared minus 2p. Right? Okay, and then when we subtract, we get 2p squared. Sorry, why did I say p squared? P. Oh yes, when I times this in, when I times this in, this p over 2. So this 2 also cancels with that, right? Because when I times p over 2 cancels with this 2, cancels with that 2. So this is, I need to get rid of these 2's. Okay, so yes, p times p is p squared, p times minus 1 is minus p. Okay, so we just get p squared, and then plus p minus p gives us 0. So we just get p squared. Okay, so that's A. All right. Then the next one says, when f of x equals 2x to the 4 minus k of x squared plus bx is divided by x plus 1, the remainder is minus 3. When divided by x minus 1, the remainder is 5. Okay, guys, what I want you to do, actually, should have said it from the beginning, is try these on your own. So get out your pens and papers. And if you've just been following along without trying, it's not always as easy as it looks. Try them yourself, see how you go, because obviously you are going to be writing the exam, not me. So let's see, can you guys do this? Do you know what to do? All right, so when you say that x plus 1 is, when you say that this is divided by x plus 1, what it means is that if it was the remainder was 0, then it would be a factor. So remember when we put in factors, if you say x plus 1 equals 0, you end up getting an answer of minus 1. Okay, so let me explain this maybe a different way. So let's say you have x plus 1 and x plus 2 squared. Okay, x plus 2 equals 0. Okay, well, let me start off with what that would have been. It would have been x plus 3 of x plus 2 equals 0. So if you were to solve for x squared plus 3x plus 2 equals 0, when you factorize that, you can then solve for x, because x is always going to have two answers because of x squared, right? So like x, let's say x squared is equal to 1. Well, if x was minus 1 times minus 1 would give you 1, and 1 times 1. So you always get two answers when you do x squared plus 3x plus 2. Obviously, unless your roots are undefined or they're equal, but don't worry too much about that. Here we have two answers. And so when you end up solving, you end up going x plus 1 equals 0 and x plus 2 equals 0 and x equals minus 1 and x equals minus 2. Okay, why did I tell you that? Because what you need to do is, and so even if you don't understand all of that, you do need to know that when you see divide by x plus 1, you must think of it as being x equals negative 1, okay? And when you see it as in being divided by x minus 1, you must think of it as being x equals plus 1, okay? So change the sign of those things. Okay, so let me do that in a different color, because they are pretty similar. So the x minus 1, this one, becomes x equals 1. Okay, so when that is divided in, my remainder is 5. And when the orange one, the remainder is minus 3. Okay, now if I substituted a factor into this, I would get 0, because a factor goes in perfectly giving you 0, like we have in here. So like, you see how I got one of the answers was minus 1? If I put in minus 1 into this equation, I get minus 1 squared, which is 1, plus 3 times minus 1, which is minus 3. 1 minus 3 plus 2 gives you 0. So do you see when you send a factor into there, you get a 0. But now what we're saying is it's not a factor, it's got a remainder is minus 3. And so what it's saying is when I substitute in x equals minus 1 into this f of x, I'm going to get negative 3. Okay. Hopefully that made sense. For the Mathlit guys, that is maybe a little confusing, but don't worry. As I said, we've got about 200 questions, past paper questions. You see it go through, and most of what will be in there will be exactly as is. And if you don't believe me, go and check out some of the other videos where people have written and they've come back and commented saying, thank you, the questions they received in the NBTs was exactly as is. All right, so this becomes 2. This becomes negative k. And this becomes negative b. Okay, and what they told us is the remainder is -3. So when we sub that in, it'd be equal to -3. All right. Okay, so that is our first equation. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do simultaneous equations to solve for this. So the next one we're going to put in is the 5 and the 1. Okay, so f to the 5, sorry, f to the 1, equal 5, right? So f to the 1, so the f to the 1 is equal to, we put a 1 in, so it'll be 2 to the 1 to the 4 minus k to the 1 squared plus b to times 1, which is just b. And now that, the remainder is 5. So 5 equals 2 minus k plus b. Okay, so this is equation number 2. Okay, now I could manipulate it and then get b to be one thing, but or I could just write them underneath each other exactly as I see it, right? So I'm going to do that. It's 2 minus k plus b. And the reason I'm doing that is because I can see that if I subtract these from each other, I'm going to be left with just 2b, right? Because, well, minus 2b, because those are exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 2 from 1. So minus 3 minus 5 is minus 8. Oh, but they want the value of k. So okay, so rather let me do this. Now, if it was a matric question and they wanted you for one k and b, you would simply just subtract. In fact, I'm glad we did this because I want to show you the other technique. Well, if I wanted to get rid of the b's in order to be left with k's, what I could do is I could just add these together, right? Add them together because minus b plus b goes away. So let's add them together. So minus 3 plus 5 is 2. 2 plus 2 is 4. Minus k plus minus k is minus 2k, and the b's go away. Okay. Take this across, and I get 2 minus 4 equals negative 2k. So negative 2 equals negative 2k. And of course, now I can simply divide by minus 2, both sides, minus 2, and I get k is equal to 1. So my answer here is B. Okay, I don't think we're going to do this next one, but what I want to do, we don't have time, but I will post a new set of videos and I will include this one. So yeah, I am asking you guys to like, subscribe. I hope I've earned your like and subscription with this video. And thank you very much for watching. Here we go. I'm just going to scroll this up. I'm going to zoom this in for people who are watching on your mobile. Okay, and try and figure out, find the value of AB if 2 to the power of A equals 3 and 9 to the power of B equals 16. And so subscribe for notifications on when we're going to do our next video. And then you will get the answer to this next question, as well as many more NBT questions. Thank you very much again for watching, and I will see you soon.